Let me tell you something right now. The most dangerous person in the world is the one who finally realizes their value, not the one who screams, not the one who begs, but the one who gets quiet, levels up, and walks away. Because see, when you were caught in the cycle, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the self-doubt, you weren't weak. You were gathering data. You were learning to discern power from performance, purpose from pretenders. But now you've won. And the moment that narcissist realizes it, oh, trust me, the game flips. Because what they feared most wasn't losing you, it was losing access to the version of you that didn't know how powerful you really are. This ain't about revenge. This is about revelation. It's about stepping into the kind of peace that doesn't require permission. The kind of progress that doesn't announce itself, it just shows up. And when you do that, when you break the cycle and rise above it, you don't just win, you become unstoppable. They thought they had you figured out. See, a narcissist doesn't just play games. They build an entire stage where they are the star and you're the audience, the backup dancer, the extra in their drama. From the beginning, they studied you, not to love you, but to use your strengths against you. They watched how you gave, how you forgave, how you stayed loyal past the point of logic, and they thought, this one won't leave. This one is mine to break, to mold, to manipulate. But what they never calculated was growth. They underestimated your spirit. They thought if they could stretch the pain long enough, you'd bend forever. But there's a breaking point. And not the kind they wanted. You didn't break down. You broke out. And that's what they never expected. See, narcissists feed off cycles. They thrive on chaos. The back and forth, the up and down, the emotional seesaw. They don't want resolution, they want reaction. And for a while they got it. Not because you were weak, but because you were invested. You wanted to understand. You wanted to heal. You thought love could fix it. You thought loyalty could earn peace. But what you didn't see at the time was that they were never playing the same game as you. You were building a future. They were building control. You were speaking truth. They were spinning narratives. You were bringing love. They were baiting dependence. So when you finally woke up, when the fog lifted and clarity hit you like sunlight through a cracked window, it didn't just change the dynamic. It ended the game. Not with a shout, not with revenge, but with silence and strategy. That's the win right there. Because leaving isn't just walking out the door, it's walking away without looking back. It's refusing to play. It's refusing to defend yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. It's realizing that the apology you're waiting for isn't coming. And it doesn't need to, because healing doesn't require their participation. They never thought you'd leave because your consistency looked like dependence to them. They mistook your kindness for weakness. They thought your loyalty was a life sentence. But all they really did was awaken a sleeping giant. And here's the shift. The moment you pulled back your energy, your attention, your validation, they felt it. Oh, they felt it. They might not say it. Narcissists rarely admit defeat, but their silence, that's loud. Their sudden interest after ghosting you, that's panic. Their smear campaign, that's desperation disguised as power. Because when you were in the game, they felt big. You made them feel important, but the minute you stepped out, they started shrinking. And it wasn't because you fought. It was because you stopped fighting and chose peace instead. See, you're not just someone who walked away. You're someone who walked up. You elevated. You started healing. You started reading. You got serious about your future, your finances, your fitness, your faith. You started speaking life over yourself again. You weren't just surviving anymore. You were building, and that shift, that's what they never saw coming. They thought your identity was attached to the chaos. But your identity was just buried under it, waiting to rise. And now they're watching. Oh, yes, they're watching. Whether it's in silence or through fake accounts, through mutual friends, through rumors, they are tuned in. Why? Because they can feel the shift. You're not bitter, you're better. You're not cold, you're clear. And there's nothing more powerful than someone who doesn't need closure because they've created clarity. And let's be real, they didn't think you'd leave because they never would. Not because they love you, but because control is an addiction. Narcissists don't want partners. They want pawns. They stay as long as they can use you. But once you stop being useful to their ego, they plan to discard you until you flip the script. You ended the story without their permission. That's power. So don't second guess your strength. Don't question your decision. Don't mourn the fantasy of who they pretended to be. What you left wasn't love. It was a lie. What you reclaimed was yourself, your time, your energy, your purpose. And now you get to build. You get to rebuild with wisdom, with discernment, with higher standards, with boundaries that don't bend under pressure. You've seen the pit. Now it's time for the palace. You've walked through the fire. Now you carry the flame. Let them wonder. Let them spin their stories. Let them rewrite history in their head. None of it changes the truth. You left the game and that's how you won. Because the true victory isn't proving the narcissist wrong. The true victory is proving yourself right, that you were always more than they made you feel, that your value never needed validation, that your power wasn't in staying, it was in knowing when to walk away. And when the narcissist finally realizes it, when they feel the weight of your absence, when they see the glow they tried to dim shining brighter than ever, that's when it hits. They never thought you'd leave the game, but you didn't just leave. You leveled up, and now the game is over. You never argued your way out. You didn't scream your truth into deaf ears hoping they'd finally hear you. You didn't waste time crafting the perfect message, hoping they'd finally understand the damage they caused. No, you stopped trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. And instead, you let your evolution speak. That's what real power looks like. Success isn't loud, not the kind that lasts. It's not flashy revenge or some Instagram quote thrown into the wind. Real success is quiet, steady, strategic. It's the decision to become everything they said you'd never be without needing to announce it. Because when the narcissist left, or when you finally cut the cord, they thought they'd watch you crumble. That was their plan. That was the script. They exit stage left and you're supposed to fall apart. You're supposed to chase, beg, spiral. That's the payoff for their ego. But when the dust settled and they looked back and saw you rising instead of retreating, building instead of breaking, thriving instead of trembling, that's when the silence got loud for them. Because your greatest clapback was never in what you said. It was in what you built. Let them run their mouth. Let them manipulate narratives. Let them post fake smiles and write their own version of history. That doesn't change your reality. And here's the thing, the version of you they tried to destroy is the very version that birthed your breakthrough. Success wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving yourself right. About who you are when no one's clapping. Who you are when no one's watching. Who you are when it's just you, your pain and your purpose on the battlefield. And you chose to get up. That's power. Because narcissists don't just want attention, they want significance. They want to know they still affect you. That they still occupy space in your thoughts, your decisions, your emotional bandwidth. That's their currency. But when you stopped reacting, when you stopped responding, posting, defending, explaining, they went bankrupt. They realized the currency they used to trade in your life no longer holds value. Your time, priceless. Your energy, protected. Your peace, non-negotiable. And here's what really cuts deep. You're not angry anymore. That's what shakes them. Because they expected resentment. They expected you to hate them, to talk about them, to curse their name. Because that still means they matter. But when you stop caring altogether, that's lethal to their ego. Indifference is the death blow. Because when you decided to focus on your healing, your grind, your goals, you reclaimed the one thing they couldn't steal, your future. Every early morning you wake up and chase purpose. That's a statement. Every time you pour into your craft, your business, your calling. That's a response. Every win, every promotion, every healthy relationship, every peaceful night's sleep, that's your final word. And it speaks volumes. You didn't need to pull them down. You just needed to rise up. Because, see, their power was always an illusion. It only worked as long as you believed in it. But once you saw through the manipulation, the lies, the performance, the whole illusion shattered. And what's left is you real raw, refined, stronger, wiser, untouchable. That success, it wasn't handed to you. It wasn't overnight. It came through nights you didn't sleep, through tears you didn't show, through grinding when no one was cheering, through setting boundaries that hurt at first but healed everything after, through learning to love yourself louder than they ever devalued you. Now, they see you in rooms they never imagined you'd walk into, speaking with clarity, moving with confidence, surrounded by people who actually pour into you instead of draining you. They see you glowing in the light they tried to dim that burns them more than anything you could have said. Because they can lie about the past. They can rewrite the story. They can block, delete, twist the narrative. But what they can't do is undo your growth. They can't silence your fruit. They can't deny your results. They can't unsee the fact that you made it. And you didn't need them to do it. That's what hurts. And maybe they'll never admit it. Don't expect closure from someone who gains power from your confusion. They might pretend like they don't care, like they're unbothered. But trust me, they saw the glow up. They heard the whispers. They scrolled your wins. They felt the distance. And deep down they know they lost something valuable. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real. Because you gave when they drained. Because you stayed when they lied. Because you hoped when they played. And even after all that, you still walked away in grace and built something better. That's royalty. That's next level. That's divine strength. So no, you didn't need revenge. You didn't need one last word because you became the final word. You became the proof that peace is possible. That healing is real. That no matter what they tried to break, it couldn't touch what God was building inside you. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them regret. Because while they're busy remembering the old you, you're out here introducing the world to the real you. That's not just success. That's legacy. And that speaks louder than anything they'll ever say. You never had to put them on blast. You didn't have to scream your story from rooftops or write a tell-all post about what they did. You didn't have to retaliate, gossip, or call them out. Because the truth is, you didn't need to. Your evolution did all the talking. Your peace made the loudest noise. Your silence said everything. What they never saw coming was that you'd stop engaging. You see, narcissists thrive off chaos, not because they're bold, but because they're insecure. And the chaos they create, that's a distraction, a shield to protect the fragile ego hiding underneath it all. They dress it up in confidence, charisma, charm, but it's all theater. And you unintentionally at first played a role in their script. You were the one they could trigger, the one they could confuse, the one they could press for validation over and over. But the day you stopped feeding it, that's the day the curtain fell. They weren't ready for that. They weren't prepared for the version of you that no longer needed their approval, their praise, or their recognition. Because narcissists survive off of mirrors. They don't want to see you. They want to see themselves reflected in your reactions. When you're mad, they feel powerful. When you're confused, they feel clever. When you're hurt, they feel in control. But when you're silent, when you're centered, when you're no longer triggered, that's when they start to crumble. Because now the spotlight is gone. The supply is dried up. And what's left is the very thing they've spent their whole life trying to hide, their own insecurity. You exposed it without even trying. You didn't have to bring receipts or clap back. All you had to do was heal. All you had to do was move different, set boundaries, protect your energy, build in silence. And suddenly, everything they pretended to be started to look fake because they projected strength, but your strength was real. They performed confidence, but your confidence was earned. They faked happiness, but your joy couldn't be copied. And when you walked away, not broken, not bitter, but better, they saw a version of you they never expected to exist, one that wasn't bound to their narrative anymore. And that terrified them because they built their identity around your reactions. They needed you to stay the same so they could stay superior. They needed you doubting yourself so they could feel secure. They needed you emotionally unstable so they could appear calm and collected. But now that you're stable, now that you're operating in wisdom and grace and power, the contrast exposes everything. You became the mirror they couldn't look into. Not because you were trying to hurt them, but because you were done hurting yourself. And the fact that you didn't try to destroy them says everything about who you are. See, insecurity hides behind arrogance. It hides behind sarcasm, behind passive-aggressive jabs, behind fake confidence and curated perfection. But when you step into real self-worth, real purpose, real healing, all of that fake armor falls apart in comparison. You don't have to call someone insecure when your life reveals it for you. You don't have to yell, "I've moved on," when your peace is undeniable. You don't have to prove your point when you're no longer even playing the game. And here's the kicker. They know they're exposed. They know the story they told people doesn't line up anymore. They know the version of you they painted, too emotional, crazy, needy, toxic, no longer matches the fruit of your life. Because healthy people can now see it. You weren't the problem. You were the truth. And the truth always makes insecure people uncomfortable. So when they watch you now from a distance they can't get back from, it's not admiration. It's discomfort. Because your presence used to serve their ego. Now your absence exposes it. You took your power back. Quietly. Powerfully. Strategically. And in doing so, you revealed what they never wanted seen. They were never the strong one. They just convinced you to play small. But not anymore. You're not arguing. You're not proving. You're not explaining. Because when you've done the work, the inner, invisible, deep work, you no longer need to prove anything to anyone, especially not someone who built their identity on pretending to be what you've actually become. Let them talk. Let them pretend. Let them curate their image. Because real confidence doesn't compete. Real healing doesn't chase. Real wholeness doesn't worry about who's watching. It just keeps building. And while they scramble to maintain the illusion you're living in truth, while they spin new narratives, you're writing a new chapter. While they pretend to have moved on, you actually did. That's how you win, not with noise, not with shade, not with petty revenge. You win by rising, by leveling up so quietly, so intentionally that they don't even know how to respond. You win when their favorite game, manipulating your emotions, suddenly ends. And not because they change, but because you walked away from the illusion and into your identity. And the moment you did that, their insecurity couldn't hide anymore. Because nothing exposes a fraud faster than authenticity. Nothing rattles arrogance faster than humility backed by progress. Nothing threatens a narcissist more than someone they can no longer control. And you, without lifting a finger, without saying a word, revealed it all. That's power. That's victory. And it's just the beginning. They saw the light in you from the beginning. They knew it. They felt it. And instead of honoring it, they tried to control it. Instead of protecting it, they tried to dim it. Not because you were weak, but because your strength intimidated them. You had something they didn't: authenticity, realness, depth, love that wasn't a performance, confidence that didn't need applause. And when insecure people come face to face with the real thing, they only have two options: rise to meet it or destroy what exposes their lack. They chose the second. See, they never supported you. They studied you, not to celebrate your greatness, but to figure out how to chip away at it. Subtle digs, passive-aggressive jokes, moments where they acted like your dreams were too much or your standards were too high. But all of it was intentional. They were slowly, methodically trying to convince you that your power was a problem, that your confidence was arrogance, that your independence was rejection. And for a while, maybe it worked. Maybe you started to second guess yourself. Maybe you watered yourself down so they'd feel bigger. Maybe you shrunk to fit in their narrative. But deep down, something in you knew this ain't the truth. You were never the problem. You were just around someone who couldn't handle your potential. But here's the part they didn't see coming. Every time they tried to tear you down, they were actually helping you build. They thought they were burying you, but they were planting you. Every insult made you stronger. Every betrayal gave you clarity. Every dismissal taught you self-respect. And when you finally walked away, you weren't empty. You were equipped. They thought you'd stay broken. They thought their absence would end you. They thought taking their validation would paralyze you. But they didn't realize the whole time they were attacking your identity, you were discovering it. You built what they tried to destroy. You built peace out of their chaos. You built clarity out of their confusion. You built strength out of the weakness they projected onto you. You took every piece of what was meant to harm you and you turned it into fuel. Not just to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. To remember who you were before they made you forget. Because that's what healing is, remembering. Remembering that your worth isn't tied to their acceptance. Remembering that your calling doesn't need their confirmation. Remembering that the voice you silenced to keep the peace was the very voice created to change the world. And now you're building with intention. You're no longer seeking permission to rise. You're no longer waiting for them to understand. You're no longer adjusting your crown just to keep someone else comfortable in their insecurity. Now you move different. You think different. You are different. And everything you're building, they're watching it. Maybe not openly. Maybe not directly, but trust, they see it. They hear about it. They feel the distance. They notice the glow. They know they tried to break you and they know it didn't work. That's what haunts them. You didn't collapse. You constructed. And what's even more powerful is that you built in silence. You didn't blast them. You didn't play the victim. You didn't weaponize your pain. You transmuted it. You took what was meant to destroy your identity and turned it into the foundation of your destiny. That takes strength most people will never understand. Because let's be honest, it would have been easy to stay stuck. It would have been easy to keep rehearsing the betrayal, to make them the reason you quit, to live in bitterness and call it boundaries. But you chose higher. You chose healing. You chose growth. You realized their rejection wasn't your ruin. It was your release. You weren't discarded. You were delivered. Delivered from needing their approval. Delivered from walking on eggshells. Delivered from explaining your soul to someone who was committed to misunderstanding you. And now, look at you, building your life, brick by brick, day by day, boundaries in place, vision in hand, peace in your spirit, love in your heart, but wisdom in your step. You're not bitter, you're better. You're not hiding. You're honoring yourself. You're not seeking revenge. You're walking in revelation. The very version of you they tried to silence is the one now rising to the top. And here's what's wild. If they had honored you, they could have walked with you. They could have grown with you. But instead, they tried to control what they should have protected. They tried to compete with what they should have celebrated. They tried to break what they should have built alongside. But because of that, they don't get to be part of the story anymore. And they know it. That's the consequence. Not your pain, their absence from your promise. You built what they tried to destroy. And because of that, everything you touch from here on out will be marked by purpose. Everything you create will carry the energy of someone who overcame. Every room you enter will feel the power of someone who rebuilt from nothing and made it look like destiny. And when they look back, they won't see the wreckage they hoped for. They'll see the rise they never imagined. Not because you proved them wrong, but because you proved yourself right. You're not just a survivor, you're a builder. And this time, the foundation is unshakable. They didn't think you'd ever cut them off. Not really. They played with your boundaries because they never believed you'd enforce them. They assumed your heart would override your wisdom. Again, that your forgiveness would keep coming without limit, that the cycle would just continue. Because you were too nice, too loyal, too scared to be alone. But they were wrong. See, people who constantly cross boundaries don't fear consequences. They fear access being denied. Because the power they had over you wasn't in their words or actions. It was in their ability to reach you, affect you, to get a reaction, to pull you back, to make you doubt yourself, just enough to stay stuck. So when you finally said no more and meant it, that was the moment the game ended. Because narcissists don't miss people, they miss control. They miss the supply, the emotional pull, the ability to come and go when it benefits them, to tear you down and still be invited in, to ghost you and still be forgiven, to disrespect you and still receive your time, your energy, your love. But not anymore. You close the door. And not in a petty, dramatic, shout it from the rooftops kind of way. You did it with intention, with peace, with finality, because you realized access to you is earned and they lost the privilege. That's the real defeat. It's not that you yelled louder. It's not that you won an argument. It's that you took back your space, your energy, your heart. You removed the one thing they depended on, your emotional availability. And when you remove that, you reveal everything. They thought you would always be there, that they could fumble you 1,000 times and you'd still pick up the phone, that you'd still reply, still care, still show up. But you didn't. And that silence, that distance, that boundary, that's what hits them. Because they were never afraid of losing you. They were afraid of losing access to you. They were afraid of becoming irrelevant to the story they used to control. And now that's exactly what they are. You no longer serve as their mirror. You no longer offer your time to be drained, your confidence to be questioned, your loyalty to be taken for granted. And it's not out of hate, it's out of growth, out of love for yourself, out of wisdom. Because when you understand your value, you stop handing yourself out like a discount. You stop explaining to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop opening the door for people who only knock when they're hungry, bored, or broken. You became unavailable, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically. They no longer have access to your peace, and that's the one thing they tried hardest to destroy. Because narcissists feed off imbalance. And you were once their favorite playground. They knew what to say to spark guilt. They knew how to twist words, gaslight, backpedal, make you question the very reality in front of your face. But that doesn't work anymore. Because you don't need their version of closure. You don't need the apology they'll never give. You don't need the validation they always withheld. You gave yourself all of that. And in doing so, you closed the door they never thought would shut. Now they can't study your emotions. Can't manipulate your kindness. Can't re-enter your life with the same recycled lines. And they know it. That's why they might linger in the shadows. Loachings, lurking, throwing subtle jabs, trying to bait you back into reaction. But you're not the same. You're no longer moved by noise. You don't answer confusion with clarity. You don't try to turn chaos into connection. You let it be what it is, disqualified from your future. They lost access, not because you became cold, but because you became clear. Clear on who you are, clear on what you deserve, clear on what love is supposed to feel like and what manipulation will never feel like again. That clarity is what they fear, because as long as you were confused, they could keep reappearing. As long as you doubted yourself, they had a foot in the door. But now, the locks changed, the codes changed, the version of you they once had access to is no longer available. And that's their defeat. Because you never needed revenge. You never needed to win against them. All you needed was distance. All you needed was your peace. And now that you have it, they're left with the consequences of their own actions. It's not personal anymore, it's just principle. When someone shows you repeatedly that they don't value your presence, the most loving thing you can do is make your absence permanent. And that's what you did. You disappeared from their access, from their grasp, from their game. And in doing so, you rose above it all. Let them miss the old you. Let them fantasize about returning to the space they once disrespected. Let them scroll through the life you're building, knowing they're no longer welcome to touch it. That's the result of their choices, not your cruelty, because you didn't change out of spite. You changed out of growth. And growth always comes with locked doors. So if they're wondering why they can't get back in, the answer is simple. They lost access. And in losing that, they lost everything. At the end of the day, the greatest power you have is the power to choose. To choose peace over chaos. To choose yourself over anyone who tried to diminish you. To choose growth over grudges. Remember this. When you stop playing by their rules, when you stop seeking their approval, when you stop letting their insecurities define your worth, you win. Not because you defeated them, but because you elevated yourself. You became untouchable, unshakable, unstoppable. And that is the real victory. So hold your head high. Walk boldly in your truth. Know that every step you take away from their shadow is a step toward your light. The narcissist realizes you've won, not because of what you said or did, but because you refuse to be their victim any longer. You rewrote your story. You rebuilt your life. You reclaimed your peace, and no one can take that away from you. This is your time, your moment, your legacy. Boom it.